Hey there, are you grieving the potential loss of a loved one or feeling overwhelmed with the loss of someone you care about? If so, you're in the right place. Lisa Hartung here, and this podcast is designed to guide you through topics surrounding death and dying. We'll dive into multifaceted aspects of grief, offering you a blend of personal stories, expert insights, and practical advice for your grief journey. May this be a safe space for you to learn, listen, and ask questions about your own life and loved ones. So grab your favorite beverage and let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another week of Giving Grief Grace. Today, I am super excited to introduce you to a visual artist, hospice nurse, certified grief counselor, and the president and executive director of the Ash Rose Foundation, Ian McCartor. With over a decade of end-of-life care experience, Ian supports individuals and families through some of life's most challenging transitions. Through the Ash Rose Foundation, he leads a grief support program and unique healing arts initiative that honors the enduring beauty of love and remembrance. His work is truly remarkable, and I am super excited to sit down with him today and go through everything. So, without further ado, please welcome Ian McCartor. Welcome, everyone. Super, super excited to have Ian McCartor on the show today. Ian is the head of the Ash Rose Foundation, and it's just an incredible nonprofit that was founded in 2024. And Ian is just such a light in this world. I want him to share his story directly with you. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Ian. And Ian, maybe you can start by sharing it a bit about your background and what personally or professionally led you to this heartfelt work in grief healing and legacy. Because aside from, having this foundation, you also have a background in grief counseling and being a hospice nurse. And so this kind of all ties in together. So I'd love to hear from you about your journey, and then we can dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. It's great to meet you. Great to share today on your beautiful show, and thank you for the opportunity. The background behind the Ash Rose, it's quite a tale, but I'll tell you the nutshell version. But I have always been an artist since I was a kid, really, and it's always been this pursuit of finding purpose and a meaning with something that you love so much to do, and really finding beauty in life has been the narrative that has carried art through for me. It's like to create that illusion of life from nothing but a piece of paper and a pencil or some charcoal and have it jump off the page. And when you see it through a masterful technique to evoke that sense of realism and people to feel that movement and to be in awe, really, of such a thing. And that always called me because I would see the work of the old masters and I would be just like, wow, how can you get to that point of creating something that evokes that in yourself or in someone? And so there was this lifelong pursuit of that, to work on the craft through wonderful instruction. The mentorship over the years was such a key for developing that foundational ability to compose compositions of art in such a way that it's very integral to what we do at the Ash Rose. And it was always this pull to finding the right application for this artistic desire. And so nursing was a huge doorway to that. It was the doorway, really, because in the art world, I highly doubt, although I won't say it's absolutely impossible because you never know, but I'm nearly certain I never would have found that communion with humanity in those environments.
Mm.
The pain, suffering, change, your life completely shifting at a terminal diagnosis. Those moments where your entire narrative is challenged is is where I ended up. And it was at first through medical nursing. And I found that environment to be a really interesting introduction because there was so much pain and suffering and this desire to be cured and done and go home.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't really that space that was encouraged for reflection. Although sometimes I'd find it. there was one person maybe that would just be wanting to talk about how this is influencing them instead of, put a band-aid on it and get me out of here.
Right.
And those conversations pulled me towards hospice eventually. And there was a time where I realized that that was where I needed to be. I was in a cardiac unit and I had a hospice patient given to me on that assignment, and I wasn't expecting it. And so I was in there and I heard this conversation between a patient and his daughter and the case manager. And there was just perfect acceptance of what was really going on. And they were
Mm.
getting to the deeper levels of how this was influencing their entire outlook on life and everything in the past and everything looking forward and how it enriched that present moment. And it just, something really rang a bell. And I was like, wow, I need to follow that. And so since about 2017, I've been doing nothing but hospice and palliative work. And from inpatient units to in-home caregiving, case managing to more consultation work, it's been a great mix and I'm still in it. And I actually took a bit of a break at the end of 2020 for several years to absorb all these lessons, really,
Mm. Yeah.
because I was feeling that burnout getting there. And, I started the artwork and I started this music project as well, that it was all tied together and it was just a little too much to do on top of full-time formal nursing work also. And so I
I
just
bet.
surrendered to that and was like, we'll figure it out and allow for this creative philosophical core to expand a little bit based off of those observations and in the field. And that's what led to the ash rose. My mom actually had this idea back in 2020. I was in the middle of COVID and hospice, and there was all this suffering
Goodness, I can only imagine.
and this space for finding meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom was like, you've been pursuing art your whole life. And I was at the time doing music and songwriting for patients as well. And so that's a whole other project we could talk about. But there was this metaphor of receiving and really witnessing and then consolidating certain things about a life story and then offering it back with a lesson, like with
Mm-hmm.
you've taught me this type of thing. And, the patient would be able to hold on to that and be like, wow, this will live on. And so will so much that I forgot about. It's reminding them that their influence will never die. It has this infinite rippling effect. And to celebrate the beauty of that is a really important part that I think gets distracted in many environments. But the art is just a symbol of bringing you back to that place of gratitude and find that meaning within the pain. But then my mom had that idea. She's like, why don't you take cremation ashes
Mm-hmm.
and create portraits for the families after they've lost their loved ones? And what would that do to the context of the art? And
Right?
I was just like, yep, that's it. That's it. That is completely it. And I don't know where I'm going to start, but I know that that's the right path for this. It's just like, could it get any more meaningful than that? I don't think so.
No.
So I just started by inviting my hospice patients that I was caring for at the time that were particularly close. And I was just like, hey, here's an idea. What do you
Mhm.
think? If you'd like to do it, I'm available. And people started saying yes. And
Wow.
where it all began. And then the years went on, and there was this growing list of people who wanted to participate in the portraiture and receive it. But the finances were an issue, and I was trying to balance it as like a
Mm.
commission work, to pay for the portrait per the
Mm.
size and detail to make it more sustainable, of course, because I just want to give it away. I really do. And
Yeah.
I do now, which is great. With the nonprofit, that's what it's all about. But there was this need of like
There's overhead.
dozens of people, and they were a list of people who were like, I want to do it, but I can't afford it.
Mm.
I was like, I'm so done with having money be a boundary for people who just want to start to heal. They
Mm-hmm.
see this as a beautiful thing. They're willing enough to show up and offer the most precious material in their life, the ashes of their beloved, entrusting that something beautiful will come and allowing that to inform them of their own journey. I'm like, that's priceless. You can't really, for me, put a price that reflects that value.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I need to completely restructure this and figure this out. And so, my little entrepreneur mind was just like, okay, you need to structure this in a way to where you can have funding from outside sources
Hmm.
provided for the work and you know, the essential base cost of all these things to just be able to take the time to do it. And so we formalized the nonprofit after it was revealed that that was the best way to do it. And, you know, we had people on board from the start who just wanted to get going that had been waiting for a long time. And, to just call them up one by one and be like, hey, we set it up to where you don't have to worry about the money.
Oh,
We can just do it. And we're ready when you are. And just to hear people crying over the phone with the news, it was just like, yes, this is the right thing to do. And
yeah.
just wonderful. And many stories to share about each person. Every individual who's been a part of this is an episode in themselves. It's just such depth to what they came forth with and what they continue to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think in with your work in hospice, you're able to really create that sense of community with the individual and then their whole support network.
Mhm.
And so it becomes this ongoing conversation of support and love and community. And then after their passing, you would chat with them about, hey, are you interested in this? And then if they said yes, then after their passing, would you create the piece of art for their loved ones?
Lately, since the foundation was started, I was out of hospice nursing during that transition time. And so
Mhm.
solely everyone who came to me were people who'd suffered a recent loss or a not so recent loss. And they had the ashes just sitting in an urn or sitting in the closet for years sometimes. The first woman we worked with, 18 years. She had waited 18 years to really heal. She was so busy with life and she just kind of kept putting it off that this was an opportunity that really resonated with her. And she's like, now is the time. And she's 70 years old. She's just like, I want to be an example of someone who who chose today. And it's never too late to start this journey. And then the very next person contacted me the same day her mother died. She
Wow.
passed away that morning suddenly from a brain aneurysm. And then she reached out within hours and said, hey, I've been following this work. It calls to me. And I know this is what my mom would want. And she's like, I feel like this is what I need to step into this space with a bit of hope, because it was so raw and tragic. But she felt like this was a glimpse of movement, and that would carry something through. And so it's interesting you live in North Carolina actually, because something I've since my hospice experience, just kind of to go based off your question, is how meaningful it would be to involve someone either in the palliative care stage while they're not so terribly sick as they are in hospice,
Yeah.
but also for people in hospice who felt it appropriate, who had the space to be able to participate in this, to compose their own art piece, to just be posed with the question, what would your symbol be? What will you want to leave behind? What's the story that you want to share? And all these things that you can put together, to have that ash work be a message that lives on after one's death. And so, just given how I haven't been in the field until recently again, which is where, everything's timing. It's very interesting.
It is.
Um, a woman reached out who she was a producer on a previous podcast that I was speaking on, and I shared the foundation, and she happened to be in the home of her dying aunt as she
Mm.
was editing the episode in
Oh.
North Carolina, which is interesting.
Ah!
And she shared that she was very touched by the work, and she said, "Hey, to her aunt, I want to do this with your ashes when you die. What would you want to become? What would your art be?" So she extended that invitation to her aunt as she prepared for death.
Oh.
And how incredible to just
How
have
beautiful.
that moment. And she said she wants to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that is such a powerful symbol that no one's ever yet asked for in their artwork. And
Mm-hmm.
so just for her to speak into that and to feel like that movement will carry through her niece and, will become manifest even after her passing, that wish will be, made tangible and that metaphor will live on for the family. And so I think that there's so much there, for people who desire to leave something like that behind and to have the space to talk about those meaningful icons, those life lessons and what's represented visually by those lessons and how to weave that together and for them to know that that's all set, to be like, okay, I am going to die.
Mm-hmm.
It will happen. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, many people are in that place of acceptance. And then they can also be like, I know that something beautiful will come and will bring my family together.
Yeah.
And this whole process, this community will, you know, they'll be a part of that for forever.
And it's also such a gift to give them the opportunity to have
Hmm.
stay in something
Right,
when sometimes their body has a different trajectory and the feeling of being out of control
right.
can be very present. And so being
Yeah.
able to say, no, I want this to be my symbol and being able to engage in that creative mindset is just such a gift.
Yeah. Empowering,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. So,
Because there are times where you are, you feel so powerless. These
mhm,
people are just like, it's all out of my control.
yeah.
All these people taking over. There's all this stuff that had never happened before that they really feel that they can't get a grip on. And this is an opportunity for them to have that serenity and that intention to invite them to truly speak into something that they do have control over and a deep influence over and that they will become. That's the thing. It's like
Mm,
they're moving into that
in a
space where
different form.
it's a different form and I really do feel like that can provide a sense of hope for people, and positivity, that there is
Beauty.
because of that perspective, that beauty.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
it's not all tragedy. Tragedy is a part of it, and the suffering can be a part of it. The suffering, some
Oh,
have
right.
defined it, pain without meaning.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if you alleviate, as a nurse and a healer of sorts, the idea is to alleviate suffering and
Mm,
pain when you can. That's more of a medicinal aspect sometimes, but if you can alleviate suffering, you
mm,
can go home happy that day because you can withstand pain if there's purpose behind it many times.
mm.
And suffering though is was miserable, but I feel there's a path through it. And I've seen it through
Hmm.
so many people that have been so bold and brave to share. And I'm just here to carry their example forward and art's a way to contain it.
And I think that this is something that is so unique about the Ash Rose Foundation is that you have a 30-day kind of journey that you go through with your clients. So I would love for you to tell our listeners kind of how you get involved with the Ash Rose Foundation, and then once you are part of the community, when you are working individually with someone, what does that look like?
Hmm. Yeah, so anybody who would like to be a part of this, who has ashes of their loved one or a friend or family or spouse, they can reach out through the website. There's the contact tab and it has the email and that goes directly to me and we'll have a conversation and just to connect about the story of where they're at and what they're
Mm,
hoping for and what calls to them through this. I love to explore that with people initially. And then, depending on the waiting list of people who are currently participating in the 30-day plan or project. Anybody is welcome to be a donor of the foundation, even if it's a penny.
Mhm.
It gets you the updates of all the people who participate in the program. So in the waiting period, if you do intend to participate in this work yourself, you can observe each person's journey every month until that time. And so it can be an incredibly educational thing to receive and to reflect on and identify with and meditate on other people's experiences and their stories and the symbols that they chose to reflect their journey.
Yeah.
And by the time, it gets to your your space that you'll be a participant, you'll have a much more holistic perspective on the potential of the work and the potential of yourself.
Mm.
Because you've seen all these examples and these teachers really. And then you're that much more aware of your impact after your work is complete and you have your art and you have this foundation of your exploration and you're consolidating all these feelings and memories and hopes and regrets and joys, all this stuff through those 30 days that are woven into this clarity. You are that much more aware of the impact that sharing your story will have on others.
Mm.
Having been in those shoes not too long ago,
Yeah.
and then doing the work, you then are that much more prepared to express yourself. And really that ultimately is one of the biggest keys to healing is contributing and reaching back out to the community and carrying all those things that your loved one still is within you and putting that into life. That's the main idea, is not to keep it hidden away, not to forget
Right.
it, but to speak it, integrate it, and refine it into your art of living, that you will too create a beautiful impact on people and be the beacon that people need to see in order to find hope. Because you can read about things, you can, all these concepts and theories, but when you see another person who suffered the loss that is similar to the one you've suffered, it's it's a call,
Yes.
it's a welcome, an extended hand that allows you to trust something. And I find that it's very simple and doesn't have to be so complicated. With all the noise of life, I want this work to be a very quiet space for people to really see the heart of what is possible through healing.
Mm.
And I think that especially now in this time of humanity, where we have so much noise. There's so much
Oh.
noise. Never before. And I find it interesting that this work is inherently silent.
Mm-hmm.
Context speaks loudly, but the art itself is silent. And it invites you to receive that and to silence the rest of the noise, to really find that clarity and that footing. And
Mm.
then allow something to take shape from that is really the hope, you know.
And that's so much a part of the grief journey as well, is to cut the noise out and
Hmm.
just be present.
Absolutely.
And through this 30-day journey that an individual would take alongside you, how do you help them kind of move through their grief? We always talk about, people want to rush, rush, rush and then like get over it. Well, you don't ever get over grief. It just changes and it ebbs and it flows, right? It's a non-linear journey. So when you're working with a client, what does that look like and how do you help them move through their grief?
Each week we cover daily journaling prompts, and so I send a little journal to them. It's this little leather-bound ash rose journal specific for this project, and each week is 7 questions. And the first week is reflecting on memories of the past in regards to your loved one. And the
Mm.
middle 2 weeks is integrating it into the present. And the last and fourth week is looking to the future and your hopes of integrating certain elements into the rest of your life.
Mm.
And we have a grief counseling session or a Zoom every Sunday. Typically, I try to keep it at the end of the week for people who are working and such. But then it's just this hour to to 90-minute session of going over each question and just for them to speak it. Even if it was one word that day from a question, just speak that word and allow that to be held with utmost respect and openness, you know, having that creative backbone to all this has been a really interesting influence on the process because the people who've gone through it say that knowing that their input, essentially, their willingness to go to these uncomfortable spaces that they may have never gone before,
Mm.
and to trust that speaking it will inform the creation of something, knowing that their loved one's ashes at that moment is being transformed into something beautiful, allows a different energy behind the sharing and behind
Mm.
the healing willingness. And I find that it's fascinating. And there's really interesting little moments that come up every time that, I'm a man who loves the mystery, and it's a beautiful thing to embrace through all this. But I think when there's a deep desire to grow,
Mhm.
to live, and to discover what lies beyond the pain,
Mhm.
and if that invitation is requested with full wholeheartedness, it's carried in a different way. That spiritual element of healing is really important as well. I don't believe it's all practical, tangible, this and that clinical analysis type of stuff. There is a mysterious quality to who we are as living people. And I love to honor that through this process with people, to invite them to share these impressions and to share these experiences that they may feel a little weird talking about, these
Mm.
found moments where they were like, my mother was there, or that was my grandmother. I felt her there, and just these moments where people rarely feel safe to talk about sometimes,
Mm.
to just invite them to speak it and not to validate it as truth or not truth, but to just allow it to be and allow it to breathe. And simply that, not to judge it or try to understand it, but just allow it to be.
Yes.
And I think the more of those moments that you can move through you, I think the more awareness of many more similar moments can come in life. It's a
Mhm.
progression of humility, really, and it's knowing you don't know it all. You don't have all the answers with all this work and the unknowns of life and death. It's just something you have to keep moving through and be open to.
Yeah, there's so much unknown, and I am interested in your perspective, especially because you have this background in science, right, with your nursing, and then through hospice, I think that there is a whole spiritual realm and element to end of life and grief.
Right.
And so you kind of get to see both sides. I know when you work with someone, you meet them and in the initial welcoming them to the foundation and kind of getting to know them. And during that time, you share do they share pictures with you and kind of stories, or do they share pictures and stories throughout their 30 days with you?
It's both. You
Yeah.
know, there's always, aha, I forgot about this, and that's out in sessions throughout the month. And and I love to keep it open, because
Yeah.
as you remember all these things and you
Yes.
connect these things
Brings you,
and you
yeah.
didn't realize these things were there, and it's just wonderful to uncover and celebrate that with these people because it's exciting. Once they start getting that like creative sensation to all of this, all these little gifts start coming.
Mm.
And you start connecting these things and interconnecting these things in ways that you never really realized looking back before.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm.
so with that, before I meet with someone, I send a, a questionnaire of reflection of, inviting them to identify all these meaningful symbols, whether that be photographs environments, special places that remind you of that person or were significant to that person, and physical articles of clothing, of a sewing machine, all these things can come from the legacy of that person. And so they have this space to think about all that before we actually speak.
Mm-hmm.
Usually I'll send it via email and people can reflect on it for a week or two before we meet. And then when we do talk, they have all this stuff ready to go. And they kind of have an idea of what would best represent their loved one. And then that's when I just take these impressions and I compose.
Yeah. And so I'm very intrigued in the process of creating the artwork. My undergrad is in studio art
Mm,
and love,
very
charcoal drawing. And so when you are creating, well, I have two questions really. So one is about like the medium and how are you the first person that has has blended charcoal and ash before? And then the second piece is so when you are working with these individuals and you're talking with them, I've heard you say in the past that it's almost like there's like this mysterious happening that's kind of guiding in certain directions. So very interested to unpack that with you as the creative experience and like what unfolds when you just let it be and just be open to different things that are, being in flow in your mind. So first
mm.
let's talk about like the nitty-gritty. So how do you actually put these or how did you come up with this ash and charcoal drawing mixture?
I've used the same method for 5 years, actually. It was just something that came to me as a way to create a medium that would be sparing of the quantity of ash because some people have very little, they only have a little bit in a locket or something. And with this method, I typically don't need much more than, a teaspoon for most pieces. And I blend a half mixture of charcoal powder with the half mixture of the ashes. And I actually have a mortar and pestle right here, actually, I'll show you. But I blend it by hand, and then it turns it into a really fine powder, almost like a flour,
Yeah.
almost like a cooking flour. It's so fine by the time it's done that the ash and the charcoal are pretty well combined. And then I use it as a tone for the drawing. And so I'll do a pencil drawing to compose, kind of like the old masters would do the
Hmm.
pencil sketch before the paint ever touched the canvas, because you need to make sure that it's right. And it keeps it loose if you need to add anything, or if someone has an idea about adding, an additional icon or a symbol or something, a flower. It keeps it open enough to do. And then I apply in the semifinal stage the actual ash and charcoal. And that's the tone that you see on every piece. So microscopically, the ash is a part of everything. There's certain portraits that where people, for example, there was one man that came to me who requested 3 portraits identical of his father and for different members of his family, but he was like, "Hey, how much ash do you need for a typical portrait?" I'm like, "Well, it depends. I usually only use about a teaspoon for the medium, and you can't see the ash in the charcoal medium, but it's there. It's
Hmm.
subtle. It's just within the tone of the drawing." And he was like, "Huh." I'm like, "Is that okay?" And he's like, "I actually would love to see the ash. I
Oh,
want to see it. Like, I want to know that's my dad's ash when I look at that artwork. And I want other people to know that it's ash too. I think that's very important." And I'm like, "This is fascinating. Great. What can we do about it?" And so then I designed this like half and half composition where his father's figure was standing holding a glass. He was a bartender for his whole career. And so that was like the shot,
oh, fun.
holding up a margarita. And he was drawn with the ash medium. And then the wall behind him that was kind of like an archway was
Hmm.
this actual ash cemented onto the paper with a fixative.
Oh,
And so it has this like sand stucco texture to it. And
there
then
you
that
go.
was perfect. It's exactly what he wanted to see. And it's not what everybody wants to see. That's where the first impressions, and the questionnaire asks that directly, actually. Do you want to see the ash or do you not? And some people like it subtle in the medium, and then some people would like to see it and they feel like there's something else there to connect to. And I respect and admire both. Everything has its place and it's all part of the artwork and the meaning of it all. And there was a woman who raised her son on the shores of Cannon Beach, Oregon, and
Mm.
the shore was where they would always walk when he was a kid. And so I created an art piece for her of the rock it was the ash medium of her son's ashes, and then the actual sand underneath the rock was his ashes. And so it looked like sand, but the meaning of that is like he's still there, those memories are still there, and that was such a foundation for that relationship and continues to be a place of connection for her to this day. Yeah, we were just down there for her birthday or her son's birthday. We
Mm.
stay in touch over the years. I've known her for almost 7 years.
Wow. Well, what a gift to be able to share your talents with individuals in such a meaningful way. Like, so as you're working with them, do you start creating as soon as you meet them and then kind of let the conversations unfold and then that's part of your creative process? Or do you think about things? I mean, you said you create this pencil artwork first to allow for the flow if it needs to.
Right.
But do you find you work on it throughout the 30 days, or is it, oh, this is a final week and I'm going to, really manifest this whole piece?
It's an organic flow,
Mm.
it's different with each person, which is really interesting to me. The feeling is different with every individual I work with and families I work with. Right now I'm working with three people at once. There were the three children of a woman who passed almost a year ago. And
Mm.
they're all three pouring themselves into this. And it's very special to feel all of them and that love for their mother
Mm.
and how they're learning from each other and remembering things and identifying different layers of meaning to all these things and connecting that. And it just has a really powerful influence on me as a witness and creating this piece to essentially reflect all of this. And so in the beginning, the first conversation is to start the week, as to start the process. And it's like the orientation meeting. And that's where we identify the key symbols and the memories and the stories that are more forefront before the deeper work starts. And then that first week is reflecting on the past. And so during that first week, I'm assembling all these pieces together. And sometimes it's over a dozen references, and it's like tying in this specific sweater and the way that they would hold their hands with a cup of coffee, and this Morro Bay rock, and a dolphin, and a whale, and a dove that's flying through, and the billowing clouds. And it's just like tying all these meaningful things together as
Mm.
one cohesive piece that flows. And it all is dancing with each other. Is one of my favorite parts is that materializing from all the input, and
Yeah.
it's the bringing of clarity, it's taking all the things, and quietly bringing them together in an image of meaning and having that allow for the same process to happen for that person I'm working with. They're vulnerably open to all of this stuff and all the feelings and all the joys and sorrows and everything that's coming up for the first time and the things that they tried not to remember because it's too painful, but they're
Mm.
stepping into all of these things.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find that same clarity. They're trying to put it all together and make it a little more easier to grasp and approach, just so it's not so scary and chaotic.
Yeah.
And so I feel all that working with them, and that definitely influences the process of what I'm creating. Like it's all done hand in hand with these people who are pouring all of this out, and it just goes right into the artwork as I'm sketching everything together and playing with compositions of different combinations and all these things. And then by the second week, it's a little easier. People feel the first week is always the hardest because
Get
it's
into it.
digging up the past and it's going to the hard place. And I try to get that done first.
Yeah.
It's putting everything onto the table as much as you can to begin with, and then finding a bit more presence in the second and third weeks. And that's where everything starts consolidating and becoming more clear and becoming more still. And that happens with the art around that time as well. And so it's really clarifying everything that's going to be the final piece. And then around that time, most of the symbols are organized and the composition's pretty, they're like, I don't want to add anything. I think you already got it. Every now and then there's a little something that pops up though. And so I try to save the final rendering for that last week,
Mm.
for that to be when I add the ash. And they're looking to the future and they're feeling hope. They're integrating all the things that their loved one still is in them, and with
Mm.
utmost intention, how to bring it forth to the world again. And that's when I put that person into the art. And that's where all of this context settles into all the lights and the shadows and all the contrast that needs to happen for art to take form and really a metaphor of life. It's
Mhm.
taking the darkest of the darks and the lightest of the lights and everything in between and being able to use them to see with more clarity in life. And the same thing's happening in the art. And so that's the stage where I try to put all that together with the person in that final week of sharing and for them to really come to terms with some things if they can
Yeah.
and commit to a new vision and a new perspective, maybe a reframing of that tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that word because it's an art term and it's a grief counseling term to where it's how can you take that
Yeah.
and nurture a perspective that sees it in a creative, constructive, life-informing light. And I feel the art illustrates that intention because now they are ready. They're more ready than they were.
That's true.
They've
Yeah.
they've had more support and the work is far from done, but something has been established. And I'm a little sneaky with my journaling because it's like they're journaling for 30 days straight. Every day is the invitation. And many people have never journaled before this project.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, and now a habit's been formed.
Yeah, right. Because it's over 21 days.
And yeah, and then it's going to be much easier to continue with that very healthy habit. I think physically writing is such a healthy thing to do. It is, in a way, bringing that intangible thought or feeling into form in some regard, even in the written word. And then, they have the art anticipation, there's the reveal, and usually
Mm.
it's a gathering, when I invite them to bring family and have it be an invitation for everyone to get together and revel in this beautiful moment and receive it together.
Oh my goodness.
And that just is such a special thing because then it's this moment and the kids can be present and they can see death in a different way. They
Mm-hmm.
can see
It's not as
willingness.
scary.
Yeah, it becomes more palpable for
Mhm.
them. They can see it in a way. And I think that's really important.
And so is this on the 30th day, or do you go through the 30 days and then you schedule the big
Yeah,
reveal?
it's
Because
usually after.
they don't know
Yeah,
what it looks like as you're creating. Which
right.
I think is the really cool part of this is like you're both
Well,
involved in
there's
the
that
creative
one,
journey.
they know they're contributing deeply
Yeah.
to whatever it'll become, but there's this sense of wonder about not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're in a culture where it's like, I want to see it now. I want to see it now. Now, 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 now. It's almost playfully turning that around and being like, no, you have to be patient. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to know exactly what's going to come from whatever you put out there. And
Yeah.
then to make an occasion of it, to make a ceremony of it. I love ceremony. I
Mm-hmm.
love ritual. And I think we've lost a lot of that in life and our modern age. And I think just reinventing some things is necessary. And so when the unveiling happens, it's just this presence, this moment of presence where it's like we're just inviting whatever needs to be in the space to be there.
Mm,
People feel the presence of their loved one profoundly. You always hope for that, but I never tell people to demand it. I'm
right.
just like, openness is the key, and it's
Mhm.
the invitation, and it may not come today. It may take time to find that connection, but it's possible. Absolutely. And then, they have it in their home for the rest of their lives. And everything that they've invested in themselves to the manifestation of that art piece can be remembered and every day.
Mm,
And it can be something that once was so dark and sad to talk about or even bring up the story of mom or whoever is depicted. It becomes an awe-inspiring share with people that they have to dinner even, like
mhm.
people are proud to report to me that like as the years have gone on, like every single time they have someone over to their house, there's always someone who said, "Oh, tell me about that rose. What is that rose?" And they're like, "Well, that's my husband.
Oh.
My husband is that rose, and here's a story." And then it just becomes like this wow moment instead of like, wow, it's like it's a different
Mm.
energy than just sharing a sad story of how somebody died, but it
Mhm.
calls them back to celebrate who they were and are still in their life. And I think that's so important, to have those opportunities to speak the name and to speak the story of that person who's passed because
Absolutely.
there's something that always stuck with me. There's the two death situation. Is you die first when you physically die, and you die again the last time someone speaks your name.
Mm. Wow.
And that really
Oh.
kills made me think, I'm like, it is so important to uphold that story and to pass along not just the story, but the impact of that person. And I feel there's so many hidden gems of realizing what that impact is from that person who's passed, and the sadness and the grief can just keep you in that small space for so long
Mm.
that you need to find ways to expand beyond it and allow for
The healing.
the healing and the reflection of the gifts that that person gave you to become more apparent, and to clarify. And it does take time. It's not just ta-da, it's done. This whole journey, like you said, is a lifetime. But it doesn't have to be a lonely thing. And that's where the foundation tries to facilitate that sense of community as much as possible. And the beauty of physical art is that it really is so easy to share in a moment. It doesn't take a long written thing or whatever. It's like you can just have someone see it and that connection happens,
Mhm.
and then you get the invitation to tell the story and to paint the context of what they're actually seeing. And that's what connects people. It's that storytelling. We're all storytellers. It's an
Mhm.
old thing.
And
Yeah.
so that's something that I think is really unique about the foundation as well is after you've created these beautiful, like so meaningful creation of art with the family, you then have gallery openings where people can allow you to show the artwork and then they can come and see their loved one on the wall alongside the other clients that you've worked with, and then there's community there too. So maybe you could speak a little bit about the beauty of what a gallery opening is like.
Right. So the intention with that is, on one hand, it invites that person to share,
Right.
and have a platform to celebrate the beauty of their loved one, and not to keep it enclosed or private or hidden, but to let it speak, let that person's influence and beauty touch others, and for the community also, for people who maybe you're up against a dead end and nothing's working, and they feel alone and they feel uninspired to heal. This is
Mhm.
an invitation for people to come and witness a very unique way of healing, a unique outcome for someone's journey of remembrance, and for them to see this piece of art and to remember their own person. And even if they don't physically have the ashes of their loved one, there is the metaphorical ash of what once was and what's lost. And it's an invitation for people to really have a moment, even in that gallery space, and remember what's left behind from all those others that they've loved. To start thinking in those terms of how they're taking those things and creating life with those things, and really what potential there is in that.
Mhm.
To see so much potential right in front of them in that moment. I think that that can give a lot of hope and permission, even, where people feel like it's okay. That's another thing where people feel it's not okay to share because it's too sad and people don't want to heal. They don't want to hear the stories of the grief and the loss, even if it's been years.
Yeah.
Some people get shut down.
Mhm.
They, oh, you're still dwelling on that loss of 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And yes, you are, and there's nothing wrong with feeling grief for many years. It's nothing abnormal. It's a reflection of deep love. And that just means that there's still love there. And it's just the flip side of the coin.
That's right. Yeah.
So I feel the galleries offer people a space where it's safe to share the pain also.
Mm.
There's people that have held on to the grief for so long, and they just need the right environment and people who get it and are willing to receive it and support and be there with you and know that there's hope, that it's not just a story is told and now we're sad and that's the end. It's like,
Mhm.
no, there's a moment of pain and sadness, which is naturally a part of this expression.
Mhm.
And there's so much more beyond that when it's tied to the connection with others and the meaning that sharing your story, exploring what you've learned, how you choose to commit to carry that torch with you through the rest of your days. You never know how that's going to light another candle in someone. That inspiration is contagious. And when you get a taste of that and you see how just raw you is inspiring someone else to be raw them,
Mhm.
that's an amazing thing. And
Yeah.
it's simple human stuff. And it's not a complicated deal. And just to invite that connection to happen allows for so much more. And so you never know. It's all creative, really. And so at these galleries, it's beautiful to see people connect. And there was one of the more recent galleries, we had two participants that had never met before, and they were both unique in the sense that they wanted to be depicted along with their dad in their ash portrait. And so they
Mhm.
have the depiction of both them and their father with his ashes. And that meaning is so beautiful to me that, it was kind of just stuck in my mind, to have yourself represented with the ashes of your loved one as well. That's very profound. And so they were able to meet at that gallery after years of the work going by. They
Mhm.
both got to look at each other's portrait
Oh, neat.
and they had the same kind of loss. And they were able to just look at each other and be like, wow, I see you, sister.
Mm-hmm.
And those moments are very precious. They lead to lifelong friendships, and
Yeah.
only years have gone by, so we don't know lifelong. But those are the kind of moments that inspire longevity with connection. Because you're meeting on terms that are very real and very constructive. It's like you're handling business that maybe has been unhandled for far too long,
Mhm.
and you're around other people who get it and they see the value in doing the work. It's not easy. It takes time and effort and it's painful and hard and it's work to heal, but
Yeah.
it's work that's worth it.
And it's that commitment that they agreed to at the beginning of this process. It's like it's not going to be easy, but
Yeah,
do the 30 days. We can all do 30 days of something.
right.
And it's not all painful. You get to share those beautiful moments. And then after the 30 days, like as you said, you've already have the mindset that every day I'm going to journal. So you have that in your kind of day to day. And then you're able to share in community with the big reveal. And then
Hmm.
you're able to share again in the gallery opening, which
Again and again and again. I mean, that's
yeah.
the beautiful part of
So
it.
they
Like,
come back
look at this.
every time or
I do regional galleries that are a little
okay.
more accessible for participants that are in specific areas. And so,
Mhm.
like, Seattle, Washington, there's a network, and then in San Diego, and then Antelope Valley up in the desert.
Mhm.
And so over the years, we hope to have an annual gallery, which we're building. Currently, we're appealing to a fundraising campaign of major donors to make this work as sustainable as it needs to be. And one of those goals is to host a retreat gallery every year. And so essentially for all the participants that have been a part of the Ash Rose, it's like a 3-day event. And so the first day, hopefully we'll have a budget to provide travel stipends for people who are out of town and to just cover expenses and make it very accessible for people who otherwise wouldn't be able to attend. Now, that's how I think money should be spent. And so to get them all there, to find this beautiful retreat space, like, a retreat center in the woods or something like that. We found this one spot that we're looking into. It just looks incredible. To have everyone meet, to bring their artwork, to see each other and to know that they're all in this thing together.
Mhm.
And then through the next day to have certain exercises that we're still working out, that would just be more about connecting as a group,
Okay.
about what you've learned in the past year, how that process continues to evolve and how your connection to that loved one continues to change throughout the years and
Mm.
different revelations of meaning and different lessons that you're incorporating. And then on the third day, to have the gallery and have everyone who's ever participated in the Astros through the years be there. They're
Wow.
all in the same space. To have the whoever flies in for, the world community coming to be a part of this, and for everyone who is willing to share a bit of their story
Mm.
and to be just a very intentional environment of what's possible for people on their healing journeys. And I just feel like that in-person aspect of all this, that's just everything is so charged with intention that,
Mhm.
the dreamer in me pictures that room of, like, in 5 years, if we have 50 plus participants, all with their art lining this beautiful room with music and the community and food and, just the sharing of life's stories and the beauty that comes from the hardest moments and just what that'll feel like for anybody there, to just be in that space and
Mm.
look around and be like, huh, I can only imagine. That's my dream. And
Yes.
each year, it's coming together, and I feel like a beautiful thing to look forward to. Our plan is hopefully to do that on the first day of spring.
Mm. Rebirth, renewal. And Ian, this is just such a beautiful gift that you're sharing with the world. And I feel like I could chat with you forever because I just keep on wanting to ask more questions. Maybe
Yeah.
that'll be another another podcast episode. But
Hey, the Astros
um,
part.
yeah, I know that there is with any nonprofit, I work for a nonprofit in my day job, and so there is a real element of like keeping the lights on and keeping things going. So for
Mhm.
listeners who want to support the Ash Rose Foundation, how can they get involved?
The website has a donate tab, and so the website has all the information. I encourage everyone listening to read some of the stories of the people who shared. There's a gallery tab that shows all the participants' artwork throughout the years, and then the donate tab will take you to the portal that allows you to make a donation, and you'll enter your email and basic information, and then that way you'll be added to this ongoing journey, really, of every participant throughout the month. Like as a donor, you'll receive monthly updates of the artwork that you're supporting, the stories of the people, what they're learning and what they want to share with you as a donor, in gratitude for making their artwork possible. Invitations to all the events. So, social media, you may miss it. With this, you'll be on that list to where you'll get all the notifications for anything that's going on, and especially the annual event.
Yeah. For anyone who is interested, what does the wait list look like to be working with the Ash Rose Foundation as a client?
Right now, we're booked up till the new year. And so
Mhm.
it's kind of like a 4 month advance. And so the invitations for people to just jump in and get on the list and start donate $1 or whatever feels meaningful and start receiving those stories. And
All part about the community, right?
yeah, and it's just that's such an important part, is to not wait for the thing, but
Hmm.
start today by opening yourself to learning.
And healing.
Doesn't have to wait for the big momentous thing, that will
Right.
be helpful, but it's not attaching all of it's all or nothing on that one thing, it's beginning your journey now. And there's so many resources and it is overwhelming for people, but
Hmm.
I think simplicity and an invitation to be present is where it begins.
Yeah, that presence is so important.
On that subject of people's relationship to ashes as a thing, the human remains as a thing,
Mm.
and just how the art is a really interesting reflection of that psychological relationship to this form that we are. I was on my way to Morro Bay to present the first portrait for the recipient of the first Ash Rose portrait after we were formalized. And my friend owns a winery in Santa Ynez, and he's a big art fan, and we hosted a gallery there a while ago too. I wanted to share the art with him because at the previous gallery we were hosting, I was on my way to meet with the woman, and now a month or so later, her work was complete, and I was on my way to deliver it. And so he's like, "Wow, oh my gosh, it's wonderful to see it. I actually have some friends here that have never heard about this work that I just want you to go in there and share it cold turkey and see what happens." And I was like, this will be interesting. And so I go in and I have the portrait concealed. Friend gives me the little introduction, but he just pretty much said, "Hey, this is my friend Ian. He creates art with human ashes." And he just let that be. Three of the people at the table seemed to really get it, and they were like, "Wow, what an idea. Oh my gosh, that's so meaningful. What a wonderful thing." And then there was one guy at the table, he didn't say anything.
Mm.
I shared a little bit. I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I'm a grief counselor. It's part of a nonprofit organization." There is a bit of a context to the art being created with the cremation ashes, just to paint a little bit more of a, a warmer picture than that introduction. And he's like, that one guy, the quieter guy, said, "Can I share something with you? And I don't want to offend you, but that's really creepy to me." He's
Mm.
like, "I don't know if I'm weird like that, but there's just something that I don't understand about it that makes it feel really kind of macabre."
Mm.
And I said, "Valid. It's valid."
Yep.
And I like to look at that and I like to inform that perspective. And so essentially, I invited to share the story with him. I'm like, if you'd like, I can tell you the story behind this portrait that we're on our way to present. And that may reframe this whole thing for you. And I told him the story about the woman who waited 18 years
Mm.
and and how we were able to finally break through all those barriers of what was holding her back in her sharing and her exploring her grief, because there was this tangible, beautiful, symbolic outcome that was a potential of her vulnerability. And I told him, we just spoke and we went through all these life stories and all the things she holds dear and all these photographs. And she finally released his ashes, this precious, meaningful material that contained all the memories of the past and
Mm.
what once was. And here she was offering it up to the potential of transforming all that once was into all that will be. That's what I put in this portrait.
Wow.
It's just woven within. It represents so much more than just human ashes. It represents a lifetime connected to all the other lifetimes it touches. And this artwork is a physical celebration of that. And I showed them the art piece, and they were all very moved. And
Mm.
he specifically, tears were coming down his
Oh.
face. And he started laughing and like, laugh crying almost. And he said, "Can I share how amazed I am at how I've changed my perspective in 5 minutes?" He's
Mm.
like, "I've never felt something shift so quickly for me." He's
Wow.
like, I thought this was creepy 5 minutes ago, and now I'm looking at the most sublime, meaningful art form. And I was just going from that to say how our relationship with cremation ashes or our relationship with death has so much to do with how we're informed about it
Mm.
and our relationship to it. And I feel as a culture, we have a lot of learning to do with our relationship with death
Mm-hmm.
and how that relationship with death essentially reflects our relationship with life and
Mm.
how we can't forsake and deny and look away from and escape the inevitability and the reality of what death is and what loss is. I think we're really robbing ourselves when we choose to deny it
Yeah.
because, I feel like through my work in hospice, the most beautiful revelations of people's life is when they're fully engaged with the reality of time
Mm-hmm.
and all the people who've lost and having learned from those environments of death with their loved ones and used it as an education process really to see life as so precious and time is so precious. The art and through this message, that's another offering, to see it differently, to be open to the story behind all these things and allow it to be a reflection of your own perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that it's again reframing, like you mentioned earlier, of we're reframing death and giving it light. Right? It can be such a heavy topic and a taboo topic. And so that's why your work is so important and this podcast is so important to me to normalize the conversations that we aren't having and be okay with having these difficult conversations. And they're not always going to be easy, but they do help us grieve in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Wow. Ian, thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your talents, for doing this really unique. I've never heard of this before, and perhaps you're maybe one of the first. I don't know.
I've looked around, when I had the idea, I'm like, I can't be the first guy doing this. And I'm not. There's people that have done ash portraits, looks like all over the country. And I've looked into it and it all seemed to stop at the portrait. There was just someone who made a portrait and posted, or made a portrait and offers a portrait for a commission.
Mm,
It ends there. With my background and my intentions, I'm like, that's just the tip of the iceberg for what that context can bring. I feel like the Ash Rose is the first of its kind in a lot of ways. We didn't reinvent the wheel, but I think we're using the wheel to move forward in a way that perhaps hasn't been explored yet. And I'm honored to really be a part of pioneering this with everyone. And
mhm.
for everyone who's been a part of it so far, the dozens of people who are so brave to trust the beauty in all of this. I'm so grateful. And it really is a wonderful family. We've really, in so many ways, have become so close through this journey and in this process that, I feel that's part of the beauty. It's gaining bonds with people that otherwise wouldn't have been formed.
And for anyone listening who doesn't live on the West Coast and they want to get involved, you do your sessions over Zoom. Would they still be eligible to participate in the Ash Rose Foundation?
Absolutely. Yeah, I work a lot with people outside of California. That's where I'm based, but everything, all the consultations and the sessions are all via Zoom. Actually, USPS offers a really wonderful shipping method for ashes that's very secure. You get a special kit that specifies exactly what it is, and the way that they do it is it's all hand to hand.
Mm,
It's no conveyor belts, no machinery. It's all person to person until those ashes get to you. And so
Mm.
that makes me
Peace
feel a
of
lot better.
mind.
Yeah. So they really take it seriously. And, we've done it numerous times with people who've participated, and it's always worked wonderfully. So yeah, I mean, even if you're in Japan, I'm sure we could make it happen. And that's the beautiful part of all this. It's like we're in an age where that connection can still happen, even if we're not physically in the same place.
Hmm.
But with enough notice in advance, the gallery in-person stuff is something we can plan for and really have that in-person context as well.
Yeah. And do you work with one person every 30 days or do you work with multiple people
It's
every month?
usually a rollover between, I usually am wrapping up someone, currently working with someone, and bringing in someone at the same
Mm.
time.
So it's kind of,
And so it's kind of a rolling 30 days with everybody, but it ends up being about a month a person.
yeah, yeah. I'm thinking, how can you multiply Ian McCarters so that you can reach more people, right? It's all about that human connection, and you want
Yeah,
it to be so meaningful
right.
and
I
intentional.
don't, where I don't know. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how I would be able to scale this to the millions. But
Yeah,
part of me doesn't feel inclined.
yeah. It's a niche
I like having the intimacy, and
intimacy.
I think that that adds a preciousness to it that I hope that the people in witness feel. I think
Oh,
because of that, the witnesses see that it's only coming once a month. This person is that month, and that's it. And then the next month, and really like time flies. Like the
oh my
years go
gosh, it
by,
does.
and I plan to do this till I die, till I'm an old man. I can only imagine what we'll be creating in 50 years, at this rate.
A while.
I don't know if this is something that will be scaled,
Hmm.
and I think that that's part of the beauty.
Yeah, I think the main piece is that you're able to serve in such a meaningful way and people and receive, right? That relationship, it's a two-way street there and
Mm,
you're able to share your light and they're able to help, you're able to help them process their grief and
yeah, and
show.
find that connection wherever they're at, whether it be a loss that occurred 20 years ago or one that occurred 20 hours ago. It's for anybody who's ready. And
Yeah, that's the key.
and no, we can't scale the work in this particular way. We can reach millions through their stories. And
Yeah.
that's where the beauty is. It's empowering each of those people to be the light for the world, really, and for everyone in witness. And I'll just keep working with people at the pace that we're doing and keeping things
Yeah.
simple and beautiful and clear and representing like today, sharing this story and the many people that this story will reach.
Mhm.
It may not be one person in 30 days, but that seed goes on to pollinate so much more. And I love that metaphor of I'm a garden guy, so
Yeah.
flowers and all this stuff. And I think it holds true. It's like there's no limit to what everyone can do together,
Hmm.
not just me. I'm just an ambassador with this whole foundation, but it's everyone who's a part of it who are the real blooms of the garden. And
Hmm.
that's the beauty that can be shared infinitely.
Yeah. I'm thinking of in 5 years or in your 5 year anniversary, you're creating this beautiful book of all of the pieces. And then there's
Hmm.
a diptych, right? Like one side is the work of art and the other side is the person's story.
Hmm.
How wonderful would that be to have the
I
art
love that. Yeah,
continuing
I love
on
that.
with another life and
Hmm.
being able to reach people? So, so many
Beautiful
fascinating
idea. Yeah,
things. Let's keep riffing on this. But
right.
oh my gosh. Well, thank you again, Ian. What a beautiful conversation. People can go to the ashrosefoundation.org. Is
Actually, just theashrose.org.
ashrose.org. That's right. And I will make sure to link this also along with any other information that Ian would like to share with us.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. That was a pleasure to share today.
Oh, thank you, Anne. And I wish you the best and keep shining your light because it's such meaningful work. So thank you so much for all that you do.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of Giving Grief Grace. If you found the content interesting and think it could help a friend or a loved one, please share it with them. Subscribe to this podcast and get a weekly dose of positivity. And while you're at it, please leave a review. If you enjoyed the show and want to support me financially on my grief journey, I'm raising funds for Project Purple, a nonprofit whose mission is to see a world without pancreatic cancer. I'm doing this by running the New York City Marathon in November 2025, and I'll leave a link to my fundraising page in the show notes. If you've lost a loved one and are looking for support in an online community, consider joining our free private Facebook group, Giving Grief Grace. May you be kind to yourself in the week ahead and give yourself grace. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.